Hey everyone, welcome to Tea and Chocolate. My name is Lorencz, and today I have a very interesting topic and a gentleman that I've been wanting to chat with since it kind of crossed my virtual eyes, my on through the wires about this particular topic today. Welcome, Mr. Kelly Lorencz, and Kelly happens to be also the Western representative for the political party, the PPC. And that might tie into this discussion today. He is a former veteran that has served in the Canadian Airborne Regiment. And today's topic is going to be called MAID, just like that. So MAID, if you haven't heard what MAID is, it is medically assisted in dying. And we're going to talk about this very important topic, how it relates to veterans in Canada. So thank you, Kelly, for being here today. I'm most appreciative. And
Well, thank you, Lauren, for having me.
it's my pleasure. Thanks for wanting to do it too.
Well, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I know the conversation that you and I have been uh, pretty intense, but pretty fun and knowledgeable both ways. So I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so I would love for you to start off with Kelly started off sort of his career as a corrections officer and how that segued into being a veteran and really understanding what drove you to that path. And let's get an understanding of the veteran in Canada.
So actually, it's just the reverse. So I was in the Canadian Airborne Regiment from
Oh, first.
when the Airborne was actually a regiment at the time.
Okay.
Um, got out of the military. My last tour in the military was in Rwanda. So everybody's familiar with Rwanda and what went on there and the mass genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Came back, I got out, and I ended up joining federal corrections and spent a lot of time in federal corrections, working maximum security down to minimum security. And one of my roles in the prison system was a crisis negotiator. So quite often I would deal with talking people down from suicide and people who were in crisis. And I was very successful in doing that. I actually enjoyed having this opportunity to talk to these people. And really giving them a sense of hope and understanding how the mind, in my mind, how the mind works with when it comes to suicide and what people are going through. So that's pretty much my background when it comes to MAID, but
Okay.
veterans themselves is a whole nother, that's another
Okay.
bigger animal.
All right. So before you get into that, I'm curious about something. When you actually came back Rwanda, what sort of mental state were you in?
You know what? I've everybody deals with stress differently.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to cope with that. I do remember having a lot of very vivid nightmares and dealing with that. Um, Over time, with proper discussions with family and friends and keeping that discussion within my community, I felt I was able to deal with it a lot better. I am lucky in that my family, I've got two family members that are psych nurses, one of them being my daughter as well. And so, adult psych, talking with them, having to go through this whole process, was really advantageous for myself.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I'm lucky. Not everybody is so
Yeah,
lucky, right? And it's
right,
all in how we
right.
deal with these coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
It's nice though.
I'm fortunate. Yes, very fortunate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the funny thing about life, right? It's the things that we choose, I guess, to do, and the seeds that we plant along the way, and then how they kind of show up and manifest.
Well, one of the things that when I'm dealing with like people in crisis, is quite often when we talk about MAID or what have you, or even for myself in the correctional system, it was always that cry out for help.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever if people really wanted to commit suicide, they would just do it. But
Okay.
when they're putting on the show or they're putting and there are things that we can recognize in people if they really truly want to commit suicide. We learned this in the correctional system, is they start giving away all of their personal items. In prison, they give away their TVs, they give away all
Wow.
of their things that are important to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and they have this plan, they create this plan, but it's recognizing that and realizing that these people are in crisis. And what I learned is that when people are in crisis and you talk things through with them, the important thing is to have them recognize that they're a survivor, and whatever trauma that they've experienced, they're a survivor, and there's value in being that survivor. And this is why MAID, when it comes to veterans and you know veterans, whether it's RCMP, military, it doesn't matter. It's that trauma that they've experienced, and you survived it, and so it's how do you deal with that survival?
So,
It,
let
it,
me ask you this. In your experience as a veteran, did you notice those around you had experienced any form of trauma before they actually went on the sort of, let's call it the veteran path? I'm
you
curious.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's it can be very, very subtle, right? A lot of veterans, well, I mean, we're proud, we're strong. We're the type of people that we look to our left and our right, those of us that are there with us as our people that we're going to have that coping mechanism with, and that's who we communicate with. But you'll never ever, or very rarely, see a veteran have that cry out for help. And that trauma, it doesn't really, it can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. I know of one individual in federal corrections. It was nighttime. He was out doing the perimeter patrol in a vehicle. He saw somebody coming up to the prison and had to pull a firearm on that individual because that's how the rules work. And dealing with that, he didn't have to pull the trigger. The person left and everything else like that, which is great. But how you deal with that, and if you're not used to pulling a firearm on somebody, it can
Sure.
be very traumatic, right?
Right.
So how do you
Right.
deal with that?
What type of person, male or female, joins the Canadian Airborne Regiment or any form of like military in Canada? What do you think? What drives them to do that?
You, you know, we often laugh about this. Like, I'll talk about the Canadian Airborne Regiment because that's
Yeah,
my background.
sure.
And when you talk about people, they uh, jokingly, I'm going to say this jokingly, that if to join the Airborne Regiment, you have to be a little bit crazy. Who wants to, who wants to
Yeah,
jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
right, right.
But when I was in the Airborne Regiment, that was the special forces of those days. That's why they were called the Special Service Force. And it was the best of the best at that time. And those of us that were highly motivated, those of us that were, we wanted to be a part of that team, that the best of the best, that's who was there. And just because you could be the most hardened military man in the world, Navy SEAL, JTF2, it doesn't matter. At some point, something is going to trigger you where you could suffer from PTSD. And nobody knows what that might be, but it can happen. So
Yeah. What year
we have
was
to take that in. I'm sorry.
what year was that? Or
I
years?
was in the Airborne Regiment from 90 to 95.
Wow, that's a good amount of time.
Not as long as I would have liked to have been in it, but it was a lot of years and a lot of great experiences, and I met a lot of great people and traveled a lot of different places around the world.
And when you're amidst that
Mhm.
world, is it how is Canada perceived on the world stage when it comes to military?
We were considered some of the best military in the world, uh, bar none. We would. I remember many military exercises where we would go up against American military, and it was a give and take. It was some years we were better than they were, some years they were better than us. But
Mhm.
Canadians as a whole were respected around the world for that compassion that we would have, but also that ability to stand and defend. We saw that in World War One. We saw that in World War Two. Right. This is what Canada was built on. that sort of military history of strength and being proud of what regiment you belong to.
Hmm. I would imagine that you'd have to, I guess, hold a political view, if you know what I mean, in terms of our values.
A political view? If
Yeah,
you're asking me about a political view, in my mind, well, you know what? I'm probably one of those odd people. I mean, I believe in. So we're talking about the PPC. I am the co-writer of our veterans policy platform. Um, but I'm also a person that believes that there's no one party that's got the perfect solution for everything,
for
and that we
sure.
have to be open-minded enough as a somebody who wants to represent Canadians
Hmm.
to be willing to listen to every party because we've all
Yeah,
bringing merit to the table, right?
for sure, for sure. So, but as someone who's in the veteran, like, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
as a veteran, like when you're out there, let's just say doing your thing, protecting the country, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a particular belief that whatever the commander is asking of you to do, you've got to trust that. You have to say, yes, this is absolutely right. Do you know what I'm getting?
Right. Yeah, you
Yeah,
do, but I mean, there's also an obligation to, if you believe that an order is illegal or or goes
yeah,
against,
yeah.
then you
That's what
also
I'm
have an
asking.
obligation. Yeah, you also have an obligation to call that out and
Right.
deal with it. There's
Hmm.
going to be repercussions, but there's definitely an obligation.
Okay. Do most or many veterans, after they've served their particular time, it sounds like you've kind of had, as help on your path,
Mhm.
but do most come back with PTSD? Is that like a given?
No, no. I mean, you could. I know a lot of veterans that can go a lot of years after being out, and something small, 10, 15, 20 years down the road is going to trigger them to memories back when they were in the military. So
Okay.
it's not something that's immediate, right? It's something that can
Sure.
happen over time, and it's
Right.
gradual, and
Gotcha.
sometimes you don't even recognize it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I remember coming back from Rwanda, literally having such vivid nightmares that my wife at the time, I would jump over her,
Oh,
right?
really?
Literally fighting to defend,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And of course, you'd get that look like, what's going on?
Mhm.
But it would be so real in your mind.
Right. So, let's talk about MAID.
Mm.
What's happening
Yeah.
there? So, so there's several ways to die. I'm reminded by this. Her name is Tracy Chalmers, and she's a doula, a death doula in
Mhm.
Vancouver. I happened to take one of her programs because I was interested in just helping people die. And so we were introduced to MAID. So I was telling her about this interview that we were doing today. And I think she shared some concerns around it. I think that any kind of programmer, is going to always be used unethically. I don't know.
Well, we have
Let's
we
hear
have
it.
to remember that there's already safeguards in place in Canada for us to have this ability to do this.
Can you
But
explain that thoroughly, please?
so
Yeah.
let me explain for veterans, if you don't
Yes.
mind, some of
Yes.
the issues that
Go for it.
veterans face. So I'll give you a
Yeah.
perfect example, and this is probably some of the struggle that veterans face, and most people don't realize this. And I actually confirmed this with my doctor. So if let's say a veteran loses a limb overseas, okay,
Yeah.
loses an arm, loses a leg, every year that veteran has to go back to the doctor and get a note from the doctor identifying for Veterans Affairs that that limb has not grown back.
Oh my
Think,
God.
yeah, think about that for a second.
Wow. Oh
Every
my God.
year they have to go back to the doctor to
Oh
ensure that,
wow.
like, there's some magical cream that's going to grow an arm or a hand back. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's that sort of ridiculousness that veterans have to go through. I'll speak for myself. I put in for a claim, and I won't deal with Veterans Affairs anymore, but I put a claim in for orthotics. Something simple as orthotics because I jumped out of planes for a living, so I've got bad knees and bad lower back. And Veterans Affairs actually denied me for a claim on orthotics and I took it all the way up. There's 3 levels of complaint that you can take it up to. I took it all 3 levels, and they were upheld at all 3 levels because the first person said, orthotics have absolutely nothing to do with resolving knee or back pain. And I'm sitting there going, are you serious? Like, and that was the ruling. So you see this is this kinds of struggles that our veterans are dealing with. So when we talk about MAID, this is absolutely, it's crazy that they're being offered this. We have a Paralympian, probably in some of the best shape of her life, depending on what's going on for her, to be offered assisted suicide. I read that a veteran was offered assisted suicide simply because he asked for a wheelchair ramp to go up to his house. So, you know what I mean? My concern is, oh, I asked for orthotics. Oh, great. Would you like assisted suicide? It just doesn't make any sense. And when a veteran is reaching out to Veterans Affairs, especially one that has PTSD, that's that first step for a veteran who's probably very, very proud, first of all, and is the type of person that really wouldn't normally reach out for help. But that's that first cry for help. And we're not taking it that way. But getting back to what we were saying before, there are steps in Canada right now that where I can go to my lawyer and I can bring in my kids and sit down with my lawyer and say, okay, I want power of attorney once I am not mentally capable of making these decisions to go through assisted suicide if that's what I choose or some version of that. I know I used to take care of a senior lady. She was 86 years old, I believe. I moved her into my home. She had no family. She had no children. She was an only child of an only child, so I was caring for her. And she fell, but she had talked to her doctor previously and gave us power of attorney. And what she wanted was her wishes was not to feel any more pain. And she knew that she was going to die. She just didn't want to feel any more pain. And she understood that even an overdose from morphine would be painless. And morphine, once it stores up in your body and then it just all of a sudden releases, right? And that brings the onset of death. It doesn't matter if I agree with that. That was her wishes, right? And I have to respect her wishes. And that's one of the things when it comes to me, even trying to become a member of parliament to represent my constituents, I'm one voice. If the consensus in my community is that this is what we want to do, then that's my job is to bring that forward. But we've never had that debate. We've never had our communities vote on whether we agree with MAID or not. The federal government has just simply made a decision, and that's the way it's going to be. Yet healthcare, because MAID falls under provincial healthcare, actually falls under provincial jurisdiction.
So, so I get the sense then that they're focusing more on ending things rather than helping them improve things.
Well,
Is that what you say?
it really puts an well, it really puts an emphasis on Prime Minister Trudeau's comment to the veteran up in Edmonton that said the veterans are just asking for more than what we can give. But yet Canada has given away billions of dollars all around the world. But let's offer our veterans, people who have defended this country, stood up for this country, made this country proud around the world. Let's offer them assisted suicide rather
Right.
than help.
I have a question for you. Is I'll go back to MAID because I want to expand on that. But is that
Sure.
a theme? Is that a global theme around veterans returning home and kind of not having the specific resources to help them like move forward?
You would almost think that it would be, or that it is, because you see in the States, it's the same sort of
Exactly.
issues, you
Yes.
know, um, and the same sort of challenges. And so that's why when you look at our policy platform, I mean, even what veterans were getting prior, I think it was prior to, I don't have the dates on the top of my head, but veterans prior were getting payments that were better than um, than average. And now with the lump sum payments that the Trudeau and this government has brought forward, they're actually it's almost like a third of what seniors pension would be, right? Which is just, and it puts most of these veterans into poverty. And that's why we want to enshrine in law taking care of our veterans
Mhm.
and giving the help and support that they need and deserve.
Do you think it could be the responsibility of ourselves? And I'm not making excuses for the Trudeau government because I'm the last person to do that.
Mhm.
Um, but understanding that if you choose this path, that you have like a backup plan,
How do you
because,
mean?
well, in other words, that we are accountable and responsible for our paths. So it doesn't mean that, shit happens all the time,
Mhm.
right? Oftentimes we're not in control of things. And we do need support. If you don't have the family support or friends and all that, you're not going to, it's going to be difficult. But I guess what I'm saying is that maybe have a secondary career or something that will help actually kind of kibosh that problem, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that the government shouldn't be responsible, because in essence, they ought to. I mean, as a matter of respect and dignity.
Mhm.
For
You know what? It really depends on how debilitating uh,
right, true.
what
That
they're
person
experiencing.
is. Yeah, true.
So it really depends on that. But
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it is medically assisted suicide the only option? I'm gonna say no, it's
right.
not.
Yeah,
Like I've said time and time again, and I will continue to say it. And this was based off of my experience in corrections.
yeah.
When people are reaching out, it's a cry for help, specifically, especially veterans. If
Yeah.
they're contacting Veterans Affairs, again, I contact Veterans Affairs for a wheelchair access to my home, and I'm being offered medically assisted suicide.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a disconnect here.
Well, what's happening with Veterans Affairs? Why are they not actually supportive of you? What's the reality there, and why?
I wish I had that answer, to be honest with you. It seems to be, it just seems to be the trend that's going right now around the world, where there's not a whole lot of support for our veterans.
Okay.
Um, it's like any other government agency. They're following along with the agenda of the government of the
Sure.
day.
Sure.
And let's face it. I mean, our 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 opposition right now really isn't creating much of an opposition when it comes to this, but they're also this government is also it's propped up by another establishment party in order to make these things move forward. And what I see is that this is about creating silos in the community again. And what I mean by that is groups of people. You know, we saw this through COVID, that where they created groups of people with vaccinated or unvaccinated. This it doesn't matter. And the more that you keep these groups of people in these groups and then pit them against one another,
Yeah.
that's what's going to create the problems. And we're seeing that with veterans right now, because some do believe in this, some don't. But at the end of the day, we've never had this discussion. We've never let Canadians vote on this and weigh in on medically assisted suicide. Maybe that's something that we need to do. Maybe it needs to be a referendum. But I think that as elected representatives, we should be definitely coming back to the people in our communities and asking what their opinion is.
Absolutely. I have a lot of opinion around death and the discussion and the lack of discussion around death. And so I'll get to that in a second. But why do you think that governments around the world, particularly Trudeau in this case, why are they pushing this?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, you look at right now, it's in the news. Canada is one of the leading. I don't know when. I don't even know what we ranked previous to this, but once MAID started, we became one of the largest donors, organ donors in the world. So is there, like, why? I mean, that's a good thing. I know I have some friends that are recipients of the organ donor program, and that's a good thing. and that's people wanting to help other people, and I think that's great. But why are they pushing this so hard? I'm not entirely certain, and it's concerning for me because if as long as we follow the steps, and we need to have make ensure that we have the mental health resources available for these people first and foremost, because if it is simply a cry for help, then we can address that. Um, but there's certain steps that we have to take, and I don't know that we're fully on board with taking that, especially when, like I said, when we're just simply offering it for everything.
Yeah. Well, this is a really layered discussion because everything is so connected, right? I mean,
It's intertwined.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It's so intertwined, and it's how we live, right? It's the lack of maybe resources, say, for the veterans that might not have access to, I don't know, like physiotherapy or whatever the expenses to go get themselves some vitamins, whatever it is, right? Instead, they're being offered MAID, right? And so, what do I want to say about that? I mean, there's also this idea of like forgetting who we are as people.
Hmm.
And I think this is a big thing where we're always, I think that, the doctors are not always going to have the answers for our well-being. It's about, medicine versus like pharma. It's, and the integrity of that, the integrity of physicians actually being able to practice their craft rather than this sort of like what we've seen over the past few years. And I think the most important thing around MAID is the sacredness of death, that we actually take the ability or the understanding of what death actually might mean to a person. And it's different for everybody, whether they're spiritually inclined, religious, or atheist, whatever you are, whatever your practice is across the board.
Hmm.
And I think by sort of, we lose our human dignity when these programs, if you could speak on this, if these programs like MAID are encouraged for someone to being able to make a different choice for themselves, even if they choose MAID, okay?
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Not when it's sort of
Yeah.
like, this is the choice, this is your path, and that's all you're going to get.
Well, I'll give you two examples of this. Okay,
Okay.
so most recently, I had an aunt of mine pass away,
Mm-hmm.
and she was very, very, very ill. No quality of life, no anything. And I talked to my cousins, and again, they wished that she had had this. She was terminally ill, and so she was on uh, because of the pain and everything. Okay, I understand that. Death is inevitable for all of us.
Yeah.
So then you take it the next step. My mom, after seeing this, called me up and said, I'm going to go visit my doctor and I'm going to get on this MAID program. And I'm like, you're not. There's ways that we can deal with this, right? As a family, first and foremost. But I guess my question is, why would we let the government make this decision for us
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to our family members?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's ways, there's already, like I said, there's laws in place already. So I said to my mom, no, we don't need to do this. What we need to do is we need to go sit down with your lawyer and say, okay, we're going to do a medical power of attorney. We sit down with my brothers and my mom and we say, okay, this is her wishes. And then if it comes to that point, then now I'm honoring her wishes because it's a medical power of attorney. My brothers understand, and this is what she wanted. Do I agree with it? No. It's not something that I would choose, but this is what she's chosen, and I have to respect that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then it's not the government making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I'm aware of another situation where these two seniors that weren't even aware that a family member had a complete power of attorney over them. They defrauded the banking system of some money using this power of attorney, which held these two seniors accountable. And then when you sat down and talked with these two seniors, they said, "Do you understand the ramifications of this?" And they're like, "No." But because it's a complete power of attorney and it was fraudulently created, this person could have said, "Well, these two are mentally ill and they're suicidal, so let's put them through the MAID program," right? So this wasn't done through a lawyer. Had it been done through a lawyer, then fine, then that's a totally different story. But you know what I mean? Where are the safeguards?
Yeah.
Where are the safeguards for this?
Is this at the top of your mind?
What's that?
MAID.
You know what? I get asked the question every day about seniors, and it's a sore point for me. Just because I believe that everybody can be a survivor, or you know, um, especially for veterans. I think about it every day. It really bothers me every day because um, one of the things that has always been ingrained in me in the military was that I'm there for my buddy, the guy that's standing next to me, and I'm always going to be there for you. And I'm still in that mindset. I'm here for you. I'm here to talk. I go to my gym every day, and I run into a guy who's ex Patricia like myself, PPCLI, who's there with his PTSD dog working out, and we talk about it. But his dog is there, and if he's going to go through an episode, this dog is there to react to him, to bring him out of that episode or
Wow.
whatever. And that the dog is specifically trained for that.
Wow.
But those dogs are expensive.
Yeah.
The dog, so
Yeah.
I mean, there's tools in place, but the question it comes down to is money. Does the government want to spend the money on these veterans who sacrifice so much for our country, or they just want to simply, is it easier to just say, you know what, you know, let's help you die?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And are they in the right mindset to make that decision in the first place?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Well, if somebody suffers from PTSD, are they really in the mindset to be able to make that decision?
Yeah.
They might be having a bad day or a bad week or whatever,
Mm.
and you know, well, I'm going to take this because it's been offered, and there's no way out, and then it affects families. I mean, how many veterans have families that can be affected by this as well without making a decision? Like when you go to Veterans Affairs, there's no consultation with the family.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought about during COVID with the whole narrative was we're all in this together, right? And of course, we're all in this together. Yes, certainly. But then what does that actually mean? And the
Mm,
understanding of community and going back to what you were saying about, being in the military and having that mindset of helping someone, right? Or being in a
yeah.
particular or being in a community. It's really, there's something to be said about the lack of emotional maturation, because if in fact we are going to be put in these silos, if you will, then like there is an underlying, there is a fight that needs to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, how can we help this from being something that's not going to be a problem in Canada?
We need to have the discussion. This literally is not being done. It's not being
Okay.
done on a provincial level. It's not being done on a national level.
Right.
We need to get back to family and community. I mean, we talked about this earlier as well. Religion is being attacked when it comes to this as well, because I know a lot of Christians. I was explaining to you earlier about my uncle, who was, he was terminally ill, and because he was such a devout Christian, he refused to take assisted suicide because he believed that he wouldn't be allowed into heaven.
Right.
So, is this again another attack on religion? And this is where I've always said, when you have family and community and people that you can lean on, people that you can talk to, people that you can share your feelings, your emotions with, people that aren't going to judge you,
Mhm.
that goes a long way to helping somebody, recognizing that they're a survivor. And that's what's so important in all of this, whether it's a veteran, whether it's somebody in prison, whether it's somebody on the street, whether it's somebody who's just lost all hope because they've lost everything due to COVID.
Yeah.
They're still a survivor, and it's almost like we're walking away from the value of life, you know,
Yeah. I would totally
uh,
agree. The gift of life.
the gift of life. Thank you. That's the better word for it. The
Yeah.
gift of life.
Yeah.
Um, so, y- you know, again, like I said, I'm one voice, but we need to have a lot more voices out there expressing what they feel. And like I say, I may not, people may not agree with what I'm saying,
Hmm.
but that's my opinion. And if I'm representing a community, then I have to present that what my community is telling me to represent, especially as an elected official. And we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things about religion is, and I think why many people, I guess, have turned away, whether it's religion or, a spiritual path, because there's darkness in both. And so
Mm.
once people see that, then, they close that door. And that's been part of the problem with these paths, is that we think that they're just, they've got like they've got their highest consciousness at this point. And, they're still working through their stuff like everybody is.
Mhm.
And even what's happened with this country. I mean, what's happened with this country has been such a secret over the years that, it gives religion a really bad name. And I'm not saying that, you know, there's there's probably a lot of goodness in religion, or spirituality, whatever. And I think actually in some way we need to really return to that, and maybe return to ourselves in a certain way, you know. Um,
But you know what can supersede religion,
mhm,
honestly, in that goodness
uh-huh,
is getting back to family and getting back to community. That community connection, that sense of belonging to a community can trump the in a lot of cases it can trump religion if you've lost faith because of what you've seen, what you've dealt
yeah,
with. I know I've seen a lot of really bad things,
yes.
right? So,
Well,
it's that sense of community that can really, really help.
yeah, I think that's actually that's an excellent point, because many physicians say that, Dr. Gabor Mate says that, as well as, like, when you look at all the folks that are living around the world, they're not being encouraged, to this MAID program. They've got longevity in the blue zone diets, in the blue zone areas around the world.
Hmm.
Um, and community comes up as a huge thing. And I think it is massively huge to connect at the heart. Because at the end of the
Sure,
day, what's happening with veterans is actually heartbreaking.
it is. It is. These people stood up for us. They defended our country. They made our country proud around the world.
Hmm.
A lot of times many of our veterans haven't come back from those faraway places, right? They've given the ultimate sacrifice, and then it becomes okay. You know, even for a veteran, my buddy died overseas, and how do I deal with that? How do I cope with that?
Hmm.
And it's a lot of that. Uh, I survived, that guilt survival, and that's where community and family plays a key role. And really have to question why they're pushing us away from this community, right? The government seems to be driving or creating these silos and division within the community, division within the church, division within this family. And when you don't have that, you lose faith, you lose hope. And it makes veterans with PTSD or any other issue, and not just veterans, it makes anybody an easy target for
Hmm.
this program.
Right, right.
I mean,
Well,
Maxime and I don't know if you saw the video, Maxime and I. So Maxime, excuse me, Maxime and I did a video in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan was offering MAID. You dialed into their, I think it was
okay.
511 or
Oh,
something
yeah,
like that, and
right.
pick this number for this number for that, and pick five for medically assisted suicide. And Maxime and I did this video, and it went viral. And Saskatchewan actually ended up removing it from a call-in system.
Mm.
But the interesting thing is, and it just blows my mind away every time. If you touched five, you actually had to leave a message, and somebody would call you back. How much sense does that make? I'm crying out for help. I'm going to leave a message. Just 1 sec. Wait till you get back to me. You know. So really, how serious are they in helping people who
Yeah.
are in crisis?
Well, when you put it that way,
It's
it
something to think about, isn't it?
yeah, it really is, because when you think about the mental health world,
Hmm.
um, there's help out there, but it's tough to find at sometimes.
Well, look at every province right now. I can speak for Alberta.
Hmm.
Alberta closed down little over 200 mental health beds during the Klein era when Ralph Klein was premier. They closed down a whole hospital, mental health hospital.
Okay.
Every province has closed down mental health beds and cut back on mental health and addiction beds. And now what are they doing? They're scrambling, or they're in BC, they're legalizing certain amounts of Schedule 2 narcotics, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, but at the end of the day, are we offering these people the kind of help that they need, mental health and addiction? Or are we just saying, you know what, we're going to deal with this is how we're going to deal with it? And
Hmm.
it's actually, as much as we hate to admit it, it's actually cheaper, and it comes down to money.
Well,
In my mind, it has to.
yeah. I mean, I was actually just having a discussion with my osteopath slash friend. Um, we were talking about just Canada, where how it sets, how it like where we are on a political platform and who actually owns Canada. Well, he talked about China. He talked about even the Mexican cartel because of all the fentanyl. And to your point about narcotics and that, I mean, if you go down to Vancouver on the downtown east side, on Main and Hastings in the surrounding area there, it is like, I don't know, you're asking to die in a sense, right? Like, because they don't know what they're actually doing because they're right. Um, and I'm thinking to myself, where's all this lack of irresponsibility coming from? This lack of humanity, this lack of dignity. It's disgusting.
Mhm.
This is where we've come down to is not we, you and I.
Mhm.
But I look at our leaders and I think, you know what? They've just failed us completely. There's some good things about living in Canada for sure, but we can absolutely do better.
Yeah, but you know what? We can blame our leaders and you're absolutely right. I agree
It's
with you
our fault.
100%.
Is it our
It's
fault?
our, we have to take some
Is it our
accountability for this.
responsibility?
We are the
Well,
ones who vote.
well, yeah, I know, but well, okay. The other thing is actually people are afraid to use their voice. That's the other thing, right? This podcast that we're talking on right now is dedicated to voices of courage. This is why you're on the show, because and obviously this interest that I've had, because I wanted to just bring more awareness to it, but just using our voices to speak up to say this is absolutely it's wrong in my opinion, whether it's this or anything else, these kind of like these really hot topics. And I think there is validity in all these topics, but it's always in the how things are being used. Is there integrity? Is there truth to it? Is it going to improve humanity? If it's not, then what are we actually doing?
Well, I'll tell you something. And I throw this quote out every now and then, actually, probably a lot more lately. And I'm paraphrasing here. So, but Preston Manning said in one of his books that unless people decide to get involved in politics in some way, shape, or form, whether it's voting or whatever, we're going to be governed by those who do decide to get involved, and we're likely not going to like the results.
Right.
And that's exactly where we're at right now. We don't
Right.
like what's going on,
Yeah.
and people are starting to get involved, but people, at the end of the day, people's voices are their votes. Even if they can't verbally do this like you and I, or they're scared to,
Mhm.
you still have, I mean, yes, you have to get out and you got to find a courage somewhere.
Well, let me just say this. I know that you're part of the PPC party, okay?
Yes.
And right now, Pierre Poilievre has got a big voice. Whether it comes out west, I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know if, what it sounds like to me, it sounds like, well, he's kind of going against, Trudeau in a really good way when I see him in Parliament. And I guess whatever your label is, right? Because you and I talked about this as well, is the label, we have to kill the label and look at the value of the individual at this point. Whether PPC, like you said, not every party is going to satisfy our needs, but we got to get pretty close.
Well, there's got to be a balance, right?
Yeah.
There has to be an accountability.
Mm-hmm. So
And what?
no, go ahead.
I'm just saying, there's got to be that accountability. And you're right. Pierre right now is saying all the right things. But I'll ask you this question, and this is
Okay.
where you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Who's the most powerful person in Ottawa right now?
Oh God. Yeah, you told me this. Jagmeet Singh.
And that's
Yeah.
right. And why?
I don't know.
Jagmeet Singh holds the balance of power in Ottawa. But what most people don't realize
Right.
is 19 of 25 seats that holds in Ottawa are from Western Canada.
Yes.
Western Canada holds the balance of power right now.
Hmm.
When the Reform Party was up and running, again, they moved into the Conservative Party of Canada. But when the Reform Party was running, it was Western Canada that actually held the official opposition and forced the Liberal Party of Canada to balance the budget. So
Well,
people are scared, but the thing is, we're all worried, oh, the election is over by the time it hits the Manitoba border, Ontario-Manitoba border.
oh yeah.
In my mind,
Yeah.
Ottawa should be concerned about, okay, it's hit the Manitoba border. Now the election really begins. Who's going to hold that balance of power,
Hmm. This is
right?
all obviously intertwined in this program of medically assisted.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I know
Okay.
we keep, like you say,
I know it's
it jumps around,
intertwined. It's like,
it intertwined.
yeah,
It absolutely
it
is.
is.
But when it comes back to MAID again, how vocal are the Conservative Party of Canada on this?
What could, yes, you're right. You're right. What could, as Canadian citizens do, if at all, to help a veteran? I know to help anybody at this point, but I mean, I think, or even MAID, right? In a sense, right? Is like, let's look out for one another. I know that when the ambulance drivers come to my father's home, the first question they ask is, are we going to resuscitate? It's like, you haven't even seen the man yet. You're asking me if you're going to resuscitate. So I get the fact that I guess they have to ask that, but it's really increased over the year.
A lot of seniors have a DNR, do not resuscitate.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not an unexpected question. I mean, I even dealt with it in the prison system as well,
Oh
because some
yeah.
inmates have a DNR.
Mm.
So that's a fair question. Um, and
You don't
you
think it's
mentioned,
you don't think it's
or,
part of what we're talking about?
um, it can be, but the thing is, a DNR usually has some other aspect to it, health aspect to it, that
Okay, fair.
right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
uh, I mean, again, but that's a medical choice that the person has made
True.
prior to getting to a
Yeah.
stage where they can't make that decision anymore.
Yeah.
That are making that decision for themselves, right?
Mhm.
So, but again, I don't have to agree with it. That's
Of
what this
course.
person's wishes are,
Yes.
and I could say as a politician or whatever, oh, vote this way, vote that. For me, if we want to really help veterans and we really want to help anybody, we need to listen. We need to hear what they're saying, but we also need to recognize that these people are crying out for help, and it's a cry for help. And we need to, and quite often, all these people are looking for is somebody to listen, somebody to hear what they're saying, actually hear. We don't do that nowadays. We don't listen. We don't hear
True.
what people are saying.
Yeah.
And the moment that we can actually hear the pain that these people are talking to you about, quite often you can bring these people back to recognizing that they are a survivor and they want to live.
Hmm.
And that was my I did that number of times in the prison system where these offenders were ready to die. They had nothing to live for, and I would sit for hours, 2-3 hours. I would actually offer to come back to work at the middle of the night if they needed me there, just to listen and talk. And quite often, that's all people want. They just want to be heard. They want to know that somebody cares. Even if they've got nobody, they want to know that somebody cares enough to listen to what they have to say. So we just have to be willing to listen and care for one another. We've moved so far away from that. It boggles my mind. We're all here together. We may not all agree on everything or each other's decisions or what have you, but we should care enough for each other to want to help one another.
It's
We
that
it,
simple, isn't it?
it's really that simple. You have to be willing to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that note, Kelly, um, Thank you. Thank you for being with me today. And I want to know if you want to say any last words.
You know, I would love to say just everybody back to family, get back to community. Don't be afraid of what the government is saying or doing. Love one another. That's what we, that's what family is all about. Get back to community, celebrate things together as a community, and always be willing to listen and hear what people have to say, because sometimes you never know. It might be that cry out for help that they're looking for, and
Mhm.
you're going to be that person to help them.
Yeah, that's an important point, actually.
Yeah.
When people utter those words of wanting to commit suicide, um, that maybe they don't really want to. It's just a cry for help.
I can tell you if somebody wants to commit suicide and they just do it. Like if they're that serious, they just do it. They commit suicide because they've already done all of the steps, the cries for help, they're showing that they're serious, that they're in crisis. They've already done all of these steps, and it was missed because we didn't want to listen or we didn't want to hear. So, and sometimes we're so busy in life and everything going on that we don't listen. We don't hear what people are saying, and we miss it.
Mhm.
So take that time. Maybe somebody's out, crying out for help, and could be a veteran, it could be a veteran RCP officer, it could be anybody who's seen some trauma, dealt with some trauma. It could be firefighters, it could be nurses, it could be anybody. Take that moment just to listen. It's what's the worst that could happen? You can meet somebody new and have a new friend. It sounds kind of sad or sappy, but it's true.
Yeah,
I mean, I've run into inmates nowadays. Sorry, and I know you want to wrap this up, but
that's okay.
I still run into to offenders out on the street
Yeah.
that are a survivor that's hey, thank you. I just needed somebody to listen.
Mm. Well, that's a
Is
beautiful
it
thing.
really that simple? It's really that simple.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No,
So
it's a beautiful thing.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I really
Okay.
appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So everybody, thanks for joining and tuning in today. I hope that you found this discussion helpful. Be aware. I think that's the most important thing as
Mhm.
well. In addition to what Kelly was saying today about, community and family, and, when you hear someone asking for help, but be aware of this particular program, that it is in Canada, it is being offered. And, if these are people's wishes, then it is. But let this program have some integrity if necessary, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, thanks for joining me today, and I hope that you're doing well, and take good care of yourselves. Bye for now.